Hey guys, welcome to Pocket Saga. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Ash wrote poem for Serena? Before starting, if you are interested in Pokemon fanfictions, you can consider subscribing this channel and like this video that keeps me motivated to upload more. This story is Lessons in Confessions by Pocketbook. Now let's dive in. The afternoon light filtered through leaded windows of Cerise Labs, casting patterns across the floor where Ash Ketchum lounged, tossing a Pokeball up and down in his hands. Goh, sprawled across a nearby couch, swiped through his Rotom phone, each slide a snapshot of his latest encounters. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and the shared history of countless journeys. Ash's gaze followed the up and down motion of the red and white sphere, his mind half on its spin, half on the break from his monarch duties. As the reigning world champion, the youngest at 19 to win 2 consecutive years, his days overflowed with organizing battles, being the face of conservation projects, fostering unity among the regions, etc. etc. The weight of these tasks hung like a cloak he'd temporarily shrugged off. Goh, absorbed in his digital world, occasionally looked up to share a grin or a rare find, seeking that flicker of interest in Ash's eyes. On adjacent beds, Grookey and Pikachu dozed. The chimp Pokemon's tail twitched now and then, while Pikachu lay in a quiet ball, occasional sparks betraying dreams of electric charges and battle cries. Eventually, Goh's eyes flicked up from the glow of his Rotom phone. "So I know you're in town for like a week, but where are you going next again?" Ash caught the Pokeball mid-toss, his shoulders lifting and falling. "I actually have no idea." His brow creased slightly, a fleeting shadow of concern. It was rare for him not to have a plan, but history had shown him that inspiration was never far away, so he wasn't that worried. "Must be tough, being a champion." Goh smirked, an eyebrow raised as he leaned forward. With a pause, Ash held Goh's gaze, the Pokeball now still in his grip. "It can be, actually. Yeah. I can't just go anywhere I want all the time anymore, it's annoying." The corner of Goh's mouth twitched upwards. "Boo-hoo." Ash's fingers tightened, grumbling. Restlessness had taken root within him, the thrill of victory mildly dulled by repetition. Pikachu, sensing the shift in Ash's mood, stirred from its rest. He peered up, his beady eyes blinking slowly, reflecting a depth of concern that only a partner of many battles could show. With a soft chirp, he nudged its way to Ash's side, offering comfort through its warm presence against his leg. "Hey, buddy," Ash smiled at his best friend, already feeling a little better. "Sleep well?" A sharp knock at the door sliced through the lilting conversation. The door swung open, and Chloe stepped in, her energy shifting the room's atmosphere. Excitement sparked in her green eyes, as vibrant as the leaves after rain. Her hair, a cascade of maroon, was twisted into a side braid that fell over her shoulder. She was dressed in her usual attire. A white shirt with a sailor collar and a blue bow, her skirt patterned with hints of navy resembling the wings of a swanna in flight. Beside her, Eevee bounced in, her bright eyes and perked ears attuned to Chloe's mood, announcing their arrival with a jubilant yip that filled the room. As Chloe bounded forward through the threshold, her gaze landed on Ash with a hint of surprise. "Oh, Ash, I didn't know you were here." "Hey Chloe." Ash looked up, his face breaking into a familiar grin. "Good to see you." "Yeah, I got in from Galar last night." "This is so great." She clapped her hands together, the coordinator's excitement clear. "You guys have any plans this weekend? I invited a friend to come visit, and it might be fun to do something all together." "You actually know her, Ash, Serena? Didn't you all travel together?" At the mention of Serena, Ash blinked, the name striking a chord and sending a jolt through his body. He suddenly felt a little tingly. A wave of dizziness swept over the young champion's mind as his thoughts hurtled back to one of his last meetings with the girl. Serena had reached out to Ash, Clemont, and Bonnie with an invitation that carried the warmth of long-standing friendship and the excitement of reunion. She was competing for the title of Kalo's queen, her dream finally culminating to this singular moment, and she wanted all of them to be there for it despite the years apart. Ash could still recall the details of that weekend as if they were imprinted on his mind. The sunlight had bathed Glore City's patchwork of time-worn stone and vibrant rooftops. The laughter and chatter of old friends and rivals, Shauna, Tierno, Alexa, Sawyer and so many more, had made the memories all bright-like and vivid. Everything had been soaking with a sense of nostalgia that Ash found both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because he had loved his first time in Kalos. The simplicity, the innocence of it all. Unsettling because the end had left him with many questions. Questions he still, to this day, had no answers to. Not that he had gone to seek out any of those answers for himself. But when he saw her again, the questions came flooding back. Ash remembered having just finished lunch with Clement and Bonnie at an outdoor cafe when they had first spotted Serena roaming the streets, looking for them. Ash had immediately lost the ability to breathe. Looking back, it was the first time he had really seen her look so different. Her figure had blossomed, the lines of youth giving way to a fuller grace, a presence both gentle and pronounced. Her golden hair bobbed at shoulder length, each strand catching the light as it framed her face. Her soft, girlish cheeks had sharpened into strong, delicate angles, and her eyes, a brilliant blue, suddenly held Ash's gaze. He had forgotten how he'd felt in her eyes, the way they cut through the chaos of the world and offered something like a harbor. In them, Ash found a stillness he never really understood. Always around Serena, the impulse to chase the horizon dimmed just a little, or became less urgent. As if looking at her was like taking her hand and being brought into some warm house he could always come back to. A place where Ash's dreams in constant motion could be momentarily hung up like a jacket beside the door. And always, seeing Serena again brought back the kiss all those years ago, this time at full force. This time like a car crash. Clement's greeting had been as easy and cheerful as a skitty prancing to a new friend. He and Chespin hailed her down without a second thought. Ash, by contrast, had choked on his food, stuttered, fell out of his chair. Bonnie had bounced around him dizzy with laughter. "Hey guys." Serena's laugh had rung out as she and Sylvian ran up to them, light and unburdened. Ash could still hear the sound, like a song he played at night when he couldn't sleep, and he remembered how happy she sounded. "It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. I know you all are so busy." She had been breathless, nervous. The girl had come to an abrupt halt in front of Ash, smiling directly at him, biting her lip as if to restrain herself. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Serena," Ash had blurted at the sight of her. No greeting, just a straight leap. And he had meant it. It was at that moment Ash had realized that he'd probably do anything for her if she'd asked him, and that thought had struck him as really odd at the time. "It's good to see you, too," Bonnie had intoned, slowly peeking behind Ash, wiggling her brows as though trying to help him along for some reason. However, Ash had had no other words to offer. Serena, still restless, had shifted suddenly, spreading her hands before her. "Are you guys excited for the show?" She had continued to steal glances at Ash, her smile casting light directly into him. The young champion had noticed, in his periphery, Clement and Bonnie exchanging knowing looks. But, he replied instinctively, with a broad, toothy grin that mirrored Serena's own enthusiasm perfectly. "Absolutely. You're going to be amazing," he had said, his face holding a sincerity that resonated in the space between them. Pikachu, ever attuned to the energies of his companions, had leapt from Ash's side into Serena's arms, delivering a supportive hug, its small body vibrating with excitement. Serena let out a delighted giggle as she wrapped her arms around the electric mouse. "Oh, thank you, Pikachu. I needed that." Her eyes crinkled at the corners, her face a portrait of genuine joy. Ash had let out a chuckle, a twinge of jealousy threading through him as he watched Pikachu settle comfortably in Serena's arms. The Pokémon had cocked his head, giving Ash a slow, deliberate smile, an impish spark in his eye that seemed to acknowledge just how much the little yellow rodent knew. Ash had protested, his eyes narrowing in feigned, or had it been real, annoyance at his best friend. "Wait a second." Goh sliced through the haze of Ash's memories. "Isn't she that hot girl we saw in Lilycove?" Chloe's reaction was instantaneous, her body tensing, a vein throbbing visibly at her temple as she turned to Goh, her eyes narrowing. "Geez. Way to remind me you've gone through puberty. Gross." Goh, unfazed, glanced back at his phone and shrugged nonchalantly. "I was just saying." Ash's cheeks reddened at Goh's blunt observation. "You're as smooth as a Magikarp on land," Chloe snorted, her annoyance clear. "So, wait," Ash, eager to steer away from the current topic, interjected, "Serena's coming? When?" Chloe blinked, the mention of Serena seeming to snap her back to the actual discussion. her gaze settling on Ash as if registering him anew. Like in a couple hours or so, she gasped, as though the information were new to her as well. I think she just landed. Chloe moved to check her phone. Ash nodded at Chloe's update, his face a mask of calm. But inside his heartbeat accelerated, a silent thudding against his ribs. Moisture gathered in his palms and he tried wiping them on his jeans. Pikachu watched from the corner of his eye, his tail twitching. The Pokémon said nothing, but his slight tilt towards Ash acknowledged the undercurrent of feeling that Ash himself might not have fully understood. The electric mouse sat still, sniffing at the shift in his trainer's breath, having also seen some interesting changes back in Glory City. Pikachu had been quite the attentive best buddy throughout Ash's visit for Serena's masterclass showcase. Yup. He had seen how Ash had been glued to her side like some love-sick Growlithe the whole long weekend. The pair moved together through crowds and quiet alleys, their smiles sharing a timid yet unmistakable warmth. Hands found each other with a pretense of necessity, fingers lingering with intention, as they dragged each other this way or that way to point out sights and wonders along bustling streets. Their laughter mingled together, recalling old memories or catching up on new adventures as they filled the gaps time had placed between them. Oh, yes. Pikachu saw it all. He had exchanged plenty of glances with Bonnie and Clemont and their Pokémon, all of whom were beginning, not bitterly, to feel like background props to this new developing play. Oh, and the beach. How could Pikachu almost forget the beach? 2 days before Serena's show, the old Kalos crew had gone to a nearby coast to unwind and have some fun. Pikachu had a great time. He got to catch up with Delphox, Pancham, and the rest of the gang. But Ash, poor Ash. Pikachu almost felt bad for his best friend when Serena stepped out in that bikini. When Serena emerged, the sunlight seemed to play favorites, highlighting her form in a way that captured more than just the eyes. Ash's complexion had taken on a persistent shade of crimson. Pikachu had watched as his buddy and how Ash had snuck glances at the honey blonde the entire day as though he was a kid in a kitchen pilfering cookies. It had been so painfully obvious it was almost embarrassing. Pikachu sighed at the memory, rubbing the back of his head, because things had only gotten worse when Bonnie caught on. Boy, had she caught on. Hey, let's play volleyball. Bonnie had snickered, noticing Ash's hesitancy towards interacting with Serena. Why don't you and Serena be a team? And then, Serena, why don't you help Ash with his sand castle? He seems a little distracted. Or, Ash, I think Serena needs you to get her back with sunscreen. Looks like she's burning. Last but not least, and Pikachu's personal favorite. Hey Ash, the 13-year-old had leaned in close to whisper, I think Serena lost her top. Pikachu had watched in real time how Ash's face had turned 1,000 different shades of red when Bonnie caught him looking almost immediately towards the performer to see if this had indeed been true. The Pokémon then had to listen to Ash defend himself the rest of the weekend, insisting that he only looked so quickly because he had been worried about Serena, and how that would have been so embarrassing for her, and how he just wanted to help. Just wanted to help. Of course, Pikachu knew all of Ash's excuses had been partly true, but there had definitely been more to it. Ash's sudden movement, the simple act of standing, was enough to pull Pikachu from his reverie. Chloe had apparently continued, detailing her own strides in the contest circuit since their time apart. Ash, his response half-hearted, nodded along, his actions a thin veil over his true focus. With a casual air that fooled no one, he excused himself to the bathroom. The sound of an electric razor buzzed from behind the door, accompanied by the clatter of bottles and combs. Pikachu peered in, his expression a mix of amusement and exasperation, as he watched Ash meticulously shave off the faintest hint of stubble. Like, really? What was he shaving? His trainer's focus intense as if the fate of his journey depended on it. Ash's hair was next, each strand coaxed into place, his hat adjusted and readjusted to an exactness only he understood. Pikachu and Chloe both sweat dropped uneasily. Re-emerging, Ash tugged at his blue jacket, smoothing down the fabric as he announced with feigned indifference, I think I'm gonna go get something to eat. Go, who had been absorbed in his Rotom phone, glanced up, the device disappearing into his pocket. Good idea, I'm starving. Grookey hopped on his trainer's head as if in agreement. Okay, Chloe nodded, her attention already shifting back to the prospect of her friend's arrival. I'll go wait for Serena. Ash and Goh's steps echoed through the halls of the lab, their pace brisk among the day's buzz. They wove past doorways that framed snapshots of discovery. One room crackled with the static of a Voltorb in observation, another bathed in the green glow of a habitat where researchers charted the growth of grass-type Pokémon under varied lights. Voices floated around them, the debates and excitement from scientists deep in discussion, their hands gesturing to charts and screens. The walls were covered in notes marking progress and hypotheses. Alongside many of the researchers, Pokémon partners contributed to the work, a Chansey tenderly distributing supplies, a Matang effortlessly shifting equipment with psychic finesse. Acknowledging nods and brief greetings punctuated Ash and Goh's journey. However, their attention, caught in the forward momentum, was abruptly disrupted as they rounded a corner, their path intersecting unexpectedly with another's, the sudden encounter halting their stride. There, in the midst of hurried steps, stood Professor Samuel Oak, an unexpected figure clad in his iconic white lab coat. His attention had been so engrossed in the scribbles on his paper, pen dancing between his fingers, that the imminent collision with Ash and Goh seemed a mere footnote to his creative process. "Oh, Ash and Goh. Hello there, gentlemen," he exclaimed with a hint of surprise as he looked up from his work. "I apologize, I must have been distracted." Goh's Grookey, ever curious, leaned forward, his nose twitching as he sniffed at the professor's paper. "What you got there?" Goh asked, his interest piqued. Oak chuckled, glancing down at his notes. "Ah, just my attempts at some poetic musings. But anyway, it's good to see you, Ash. Back in town for a little bit, I hope." Ash, rubbing the back of his neck, nodded. "Yeah, I need a little break, I think." His eyes followed Oak's path. "Are you heading to the cafeteria too?" "Of course," Oak replied, his eyes lighting up with a mix of humor and hunger. It is lunchtime, after all, and no great poem was ever written on an empty stomach. Together, they made their way to the cafeteria, the clatter of trays and the murmur of conversation enveloping them as they joined the queue. Ash shared tales of his recent adventures in Galar, while Goh excitedly recounted the details of his latest captures, each story dotted with Oak's thoughtful nods and intrigued hums. Seated with their trays, the conversation flowed as easily as the foot traffic of the lab. Yet, as they ate, Oak's focus shifted back to his paper, pen poised over the blank spaces between his earlier words. The professor's engagement with his meal waned, his attention captured entirely by the pursuit of the perfect verse. Ash and Goh exchanged glances, both amused and impressed, as Oak's food grew cold. "What's a word that rhymes with divine?" Oak mused aloud, tapping his pen against the paper as if to coax the words from its tip. Goh, with a playful smirk, chimed in, "Mamoswine." His eyebrows danced, clearly amused by his own suggestion. "How about sunshine?" Ash, not missing a beat, added, "though, I guess that's more of a half-rhyme." He shrugged, an amused glint in his eye as he watched Grookey snag noodles from atop Goh's head. Oak pondered their offerings, then attempted to weave them into his verse. "Your smile can make the world like fine wine? A treasured time? Oh, if the words could only come as easily to me as they do Lord Chiron." Goh, curiosity piqued despite the noodle theft, asked, "So what are you writing about anyway?" He slurped some broth, eyes on Oak. Oak's gaze softened, a dreamy quality overtaking his expression. "Love." The exchange of looks between Ash and Goh was swift. "Forget I asked," Goh muttered with his mouth full. But Oak, undeterred and fixing an interested stare on the two, pressed on. "But it's Valentine's Day tomorrow? Didn't you know?" Ash blinked, the date registering with a slow dawning. Valentine's Day. Goh shrugged, disinterest clear. "What the heck is that?" Oak chuckled at their reactions, his eyes twinkling with amusement and disbelief. "It's a holiday where you celebrate someone you love. It actually originated in Galar, but has found its popularity around the world." "But you mean to tell me you handsome young men have no plans on Valentine's Day?" His look was sly, teasing the possibility they might be overlooking something, or someone, important. "Nope." Goh shrugged, his indifference clear. "But we are hanging out with some friends. I think we're doing something with Chloe and some girl Ash knows." "Oh," Oak looked surprised. His hands grasped the table as he leaned forward. "Are you going to do something nice for these ladies?" Ash, caught mid-bite, tried to sound cool. "Why would we do that?" He thrust his chopsticks back into his stir-fry and tried to concentrate very hard on chewing. On his shoulders, Pikachu rolled his eyes. "I don't know, because it would be kind," Oak responded, his eyebrow arching, a gentle nudge in his tone. At this, a twinge of guilt pinched at Ash. The thought hadn't crossed his mind until now. "Do you think we should do something nice for them?" He swallowed hard, shifting in his seat. "I mean, they're just our friends." "Ah," Oak intoned with understanding. "Well, Valentine's Day can also be a celebration of someone you care about. It doesn't necessarily have to be about romance." Ash turned to go, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "I don't know, should we do something then?" The thought of Serena, and the possibility of her feeling left out on a holiday dedicated to affection, nudged at his conscience. She loved special things, he knew. And she probably really liked Valentine's Day, probably going out of her way to make her friends feel special. "But what should we do?" Go questioned, his brow furrowing. "I mean, won't they get the wrong impression if we make it a big deal?" Oak, ever the mentor, offered a simple solution. "You could just get them something nice. A friendly card or," Oak snapped his fingers with a spreading grin, "you could write them a poem." Go's nose wrinkled at the suggestion. "No way. Really, Go, I think they would appreciate it very much." Oak's tone became more chiding as he folded his arms before his chest. "All you have to do is find some nice things to say about them. Surely, that's not so hard if they're your friends." Oak's advice was seasoned with a hint of challenge, a gentle push. Pikachu really liked this idea, as well as Oak's knowing stare. That researcher could read Ash like a book at this point, and ever since Go had mentioned Ash's friend, the champion hadn't been able to keep his cheeks pale. Ash, inspired by the idea, found a new resolve. "Okay. Sounds awesome. Writing a little poem didn't sound so bad." He had always found ways to express his admiration for Serena, and he knew well enough how much she liked it when he told her nice things. How hard could it be to write them down? Go, initially hesitant, now caught the wave of enthusiasm. "I guess?" He looked to Ash, sharing in the determination that had taken hold. "Cool. How do we start?" Oak launched into an enthusiastic lecture on poetic forms, his words tumbling out in a torrent of literary enthusiasm. "Sonnet? Ballad? Are we alternating between iambic tetrameter and trimeter? Any heroic couplets? You could choose between a Colossian or Galerian sonnet structure. Or, if you would like to truly test your limits, trochaic tetrameter. On whose eyes I might approve this flower's force in stirring love." "Oh ho." Ash and Goh exchanged glances before returning their attention to the professor, attempting feebly to follow Oak's rapid-fire overview of poetic structure. The depth of choices, the variety of rhythms and patterns, was dizzying as well as nonsensical to the two. Then, as if remembering his audience, Oak simplified his advice. "Start with an image. What do your friends remind you of? For example, a famous Galerian penned the words, 'O bright star.' And from there, we were taken on a celestial journey around the firmament until at last we followed the starlight to his sleeping love, who the poet longed to cherish with steadfast adoration." Go and Ash exchanged another look, both of them at a loss. The task seemed simple enough in theory, but the pressure of encapsulating their feelings in just a few words was daunting. Even Pikachu and Grookey looked puzzled. Oak, sensing their hesitation, offered further guidance. "Just think of something that reminds you of them. Or of a memory. Memories are mental images, you know." Ash paused, the gears in his mind turning. A memory, the word echoed in his head, unlocking a floodgate of moments shared, laughter, battles fought side by side, and quiet exchanges that echoed like in a dream. In the bustling hive of the airport, with its constant hum of arrivals and departures, voices overlapping in a cacophony of greetings and farewells, Ash found himself anchored to a moment that had never quite left him the same. The vast, open spaces of the terminal, the gleam of polished floors reflecting the hurried steps of travelers, and the vast windows that framed the sky, a backdrop to their goodbye. Serena had begun to step away, moving towards the descending escalator that would carry her from sight. Ash's heart had tugged at him then, an impulse that had drawn him forward, 2 determined steps in her direction, as if to bridge the distance that was about to stretch between them. Then, as if pulled by the same unseen force, Serena turned. "There's just one more thing." Her movement was sudden, a swift pivot on her heel that brought her rushing back to him, closing the space with a few hurried steps. Ash's eyes had gone wide, his pulse pounding in his ears. Her lips, soft and determined, found his in a fleeting, tender touch. A kiss that spoke of promises, of memories cherished, and of hopes silently harbored. It had been like a quiet storm and a crashing tree all at once. She had met him with a gentle urgency, a soft collision that seemed to stop time itself where her warmth had enveloped him. Ash, Goh's concern snapped Ash back to the present, his daydream fading as the reality of the cafeteria and its occupants returned. Are you okay? Pikachu couldn't contain a muffled snicker, squeezing a ketchup packet with a bit too much zeal as he watched Ash's cheeks turn a vivid shade of red. Shaking his head, the electric Pokemon's eyes danced with amusement. I'm great, Ash announced, the volume of his declaration ricocheting off the cafeteria walls, a touch too loud in his attempt to cover his fluster. Oak, seemingly unfazed, continued with his guidance, a teacher always. But you can also go off into nature if you need to feel inspired. Many of the great poets found things like the sun to compare their love to, bright and blazing. Or supple verdant hills were generally metaphors for, physical features. Goh, pencil poised in the air, redirected the conversation with a pointed look at Oak. But we're not talking about love here. Remember, these girls are just our friends. Oak, catching himself, exhaled a sigh of relief, grateful for the pivot away from the potentially awkward terrain he had nearly navigated them into. Right, he agreed, a hint of embarrassment coloring his tone. Goh, meanwhile, seemed to mull over Oak's unintentional suggestion, a mischievous glint in his eye. But maybe I can still talk about her verdant hills? He mused aloud, pencil tapping against his chin as he considered jotting something down. Oak's response was almost urgent, a plea for redirection. No, please forget I said that, he implored, hoping to steer the conversation back to safer waters. Ash, thoughtful, seized upon a different strand of Oak's advice. Go, let's go to the harbor and walk around a little, he suggested, envisioning the harbor's expansive view as a fresh source of inspiration, a place where the water, and maybe some fresh air, could spark the right words and make everything swirling around in his mind the last 2 hours go away. Great idea, Ash. Oak's enthusiasm for the proposed change of scenery was palpable. Many poets found inspiration being by the sea, that omnipotent life force that both gives and takes away. Goh, ever practical, shrugged in agreement. I guess we can. I can text Chloe to meet us there. Then, with a speculative tone, he added, say, could I compare Chloe to something like a Psyduck? Always appearing calm on the surface, but with the potential for a psychotic outburst when you least expect it? Ash, Pikachu, and Grookey simultaneously tilted their heads and let out a visible sigh. I don't think that even makes sense, Ash managed to mutter, trying to navigate the bizarre analogy. Oak, always the diplomat, chuckled softly at Goh's creative leap. I would refrain from such comparisons, Goh. While the spirit is there, the comparison might, fall flat. Goh, taking the hint, simply nodded. Whatever you say, but I thought it might be pretty good. At the Vermilion City Harbor, Ash and Pikachu perched themselves on the edge of a dock, Ash's feet hanging just above the water's gentle lapping against the wooden piers. The harbor was quaint, a postcard scene of serenity with cobblestone pathways dividing the small, neatly painted houses. Each building, topped with blue tiles, faced the sea. A few boats, tethered to the docks, swayed with the rhythm of the waves, their sails furled, resting from the blowing wind. Goh and Grookey, in search of a drink, left Ash and his best friend alone for a moment at the seafront. The water, with its gentle sloshing and the sun's bright reflection, transported Ash back to another day, another seafront encounter. Serena had stood on the dock at the Lily Cove while blue waters rushed in to fill the space as Ash, Goh, and Chloe's boat began to pull away from shore, having made their ship just in time. Ash remembered how the sunset seemed to be reflected on Serena's face, wrapping her in a warm glow that seemed to pull the very gold from her hair and the depth of the ocean into her eyes. Her presence had been undeniable, her features coming alive beneath the auric haze that glossed over the memory. Composed and confident, she had smiled and waved and promised to be the best. He remembered shouting back for them to both do their best. He remembered how happy he'd been to see her before competing in the Masters 8. He felt like their paths had crossed just at the right time. Seeing her reminded him, again, to never give up until the end, to remember that that was who he was. Ash's brow furrowed, his thoughts suddenly wandering to the ribbon he had given Serena, the absence of it in recent times pressing on his mind like a shadow. It was a small thing, a strip of fabric, yet he now felt as though her not wearing it was significant. He hadn't caught sight of it since those days left behind in Kalos, since their parting that had felt like the close of a chapter. It puzzled him, this concern for the ribbon, this wondering over it. Why did it really matter? Ash was pulled back to the present, to the notebook lying open before him. A blank page entrusted to him by Professor Oak for his poem. He might as well get started. Again, how hard could it really be? Serena, he began, his pen hovering after the name before coming to a full stop. With a curious twitch, Pikachu leaned in to sniff at the corner of the paper, his expression morphing into a sly smile as it met Ash's gaze. What? Ash released a groan, trying to keep up a light-hearted grin. I could say a lot about her, you know. That's what's hard. She's a great friend. Pikachu raised a brow as it stepped back, crossing his little arms, tapping one paw as if to urge Ash on. Pika. Ash let out a scoff, the defensive tone in his voice slipping out of his casual demeanor. Come on, he said, it's not like that. Yet, in the space between words and silence, the unsaid seemed to hang in the air. Goh approached, the clinking of soda bottles in his hands announcing his return. What's not like that? He inquired, catching the tail end of the conversation. Nothing, Ash muttered, brushing off the question with a swift glance away. Pikachu, however, was not as discreet, chattering away with pointed looks at Ash. Pikachu. Goh, setting the sodas down, glanced at the notebook's mildly barren page. Are you already starting? He asked, noting the single name etched at the top. Ash's eyes flicked to Goh's calm demeanor. Aren't you? I already have a plan. Goh shrugged and sniffed as he began to open up one of the bottles, so I'm not in a hurry. Ash's skepticism was evident. What's your plan? He asked. Goh took a generous gulp of his soda, passing the can to Grookey for a sip. I was just gonna write about Chloe always being there for me or something. Maybe compare her to a Magikarp in the ocean, because they're everywhere and you can't get anywhere on the sea without running into one. He gestured dismissively, as if it were all that simple. Ash gave a small chuckle, wishing he could shake off the heavy stuff and relax like Goh, who seemed to handle the whole friendship thing with Chloe so well. I see. Ash trailed off, his eyes lingering on the horizon where the water met the sky, his mind still swimming with thoughts of Serena. Goh, oblivious to Ash's internal struggle, went on with his casual brainstorming. Just think about comparing her to something, like Chloe, my buddy, you're like a skitty and sometimes just as petty. Hey, that rhymed. Whoa, Ash's eyes widened a bit, impressed despite himself. Poetry comes pretty easy to you, huh? Goh, already unwrapping an oran berry he'd slipped out of his backpack, shot Ash a casual grin. Yeah, it's not too hard once you get going, the city boy said proudly, as if poetry was just another one of those things, like tossing Pokeballs or camping out with Pokemon. Compare her to something. Ash drummed the pen on the paper, his focus narrowing as he sifted through the gallery of memories for one that could mirror Serena's elegance. He landed on a moment in Glory City, under the chandeliers that dripped light like raindrops at the evening ball just before she would claim the title of Kalos Queen. She had descended the staircase, each step measured, unhurried, her gown a cascade of red that seemed to capture and play with every beam of light in the room. The dress, a more sophisticated and mature version of the red and pink dress she'd worn all those years ago, clung and flowed with her every move. The crowds were in awe of her as she had drawn near to the dance floor, her approach not a walk but a glide, effortless. Ash's mouth had gone dry and his stomach had tightened and grown heavy. There, in her presence, words had failed him, her composure pushing against his inner turmoil. She had stopped before him. Breathlessly, as though planning it, Serena had taken one of Ash's hands in both of hers and began pulling him towards the center of the ballroom. I want you to dance with me, she had said, her smile dazzling as she leaned in close. She had smelled like some delicate white flower Ash had once seen in a meadow somewhere. I'm making sure of it this time, Serena had insisted. Ash remembered he could hardly breathe. He hadn't even realized he'd wanted to dance with her, had always wanted to dance with her, so badly until she was in his arms. His hands had been shaking as he placed one at her waist and held the other out open for hers. And when the music swelled to life, Ash's mind had gone blank. All he could distinctly remember was like the feeling of his heart breaking off. Goh sliced through the harbor's calm and Ash's memory. "Oh, Chloe says they're here." He glanced up from his Rotom phone, waving a hand in front of the champion's face. Ash, caught off guard, could only muster a startled, "What?" Pikachu. The electric type chirped with excitement, jumping onto Ash's shoulder. Goh nodded, eyes still on his screen. "Yeah, she says the bus dropped them off at the Pokemon Center. We should go meet up." Ash's fingers moved to his cap, lifting it slightly before pressing it back down onto his head, a nervous tic he hadn't quite outgrown. In one swift motion, he shoved the notebook into the back pocket of his jeans. "Yeah. Let's do it." Yet, as Goh turned to lead the way, Ash paused, a sudden thought anchoring him in place. Quickly, he pulled the notebook back out, the urgency of the moment pressing on him. With Goh a few steps ahead, unaware of the pause, Ash scribbled down a rush of thoughts, a burst of inspiration perhaps sparked by all the memories that kept flooding in. The pen moved swiftly, tracing the outline of something he decided he couldn't leave unrecorded. Pikachu looked on from his trainer's shoulder, curious. Once done, Ash stuffed the notebook back into his pocket, a silent promise to revisit those hastily penned words later. Catching up with a few quick strides, Ash rejoined Goh and Grookey, ready now to face whatever the meeting would bring. Ash felt a strange adrenaline take over him. He would tap his foot rapidly against the ground, or occasionally, he'd remove his hat to run a hand through his hair, and attempt to manage his appearance without being obvious about showing his concern. Checking his reflection in any nearby window became a subtle habit. He wanted to make sure he didn't look a mess. And every now and then, Ash would pull out the notebook from his pocket, opening it as if to reassure himself of the words he'd put down, then snapping it shut with a decisive motion. Pikachu, perceiving the flurry of emotions coursing through Ash, watched with a blend of amusement and empathy. The electric Pokemon felt a twinge of sadness for his buddy, understanding the depth of his feelings. Even if Ash himself didn't, especially recalling the night Serena had clinched the title of Kalo's queen. During Serena's performance that night, Pikachu had turned his gaze from the spectacle on stage to observe Ash. The intensity of Ash's focus had been unparalleled, his usually expressive face stilled into an odd silence. Unlike the cheerful encouragement he typically offered during her performances, Ash had been completely absorbed. The performance had been a masterpiece of coordination and grace. Delphix's flames had leapt and twirled, painting the air with light and warmth, while Sylveon's auric winds had woven through the space, a visible dance of force and finesse. Pancham's icy punches had exploded in a spectacle, shards glittering like diamonds under the stage lights. And there was Serena, at the heart of it all, directing each movement with an assured calm that hid the complexity of the choreography. Pikachu had noticed the subtle signs of his best friend's deep investment in the performance. Ash's breath had caught in his throat, a shuddering intake that faltered, and Ash's heartbeat, usually steady and strong, had fluttered erratically, a drumbeat out of sync. Pikachu's sensitive ears had picked up on these quiet betrayals of emotion, and suddenly he understood it all. And if Ash didn't know the moment he fell in love, then Pikachu did. Everything after Serena's performance had only confirmed it all for the small, yellow rodent who was both ecstatic and at the same time, a little sad at his own revelation, because he had to suffer through watching his best friend skirt around his feelings, draw away from them, hesitate. When Serena was declared the victor, the theater erupted into chaos. The crowd's applause thundered like a storm, a cacophony of cheers and whistles that filled the air with tangible excitement. Fans clustered around her, each seeking a moment of her time, while the media buzzed like a swarm of beedrills, eager to capture her thoughts, her reactions, everything. The celebration stretched long into the night, the spotlight firmly on Serena as she navigated her newfound fame. By the time Serena managed to extricate herself from the throngs of admirers and the insistent press, the night had deepened. She emerged from backstage to find that only Ash had remained. Bonnie had succumbed to sleep's call, necessitating Clement's departure with his sister in tow. Pikachu, sitting beside Ash's legs, had observed as Serena, after a moment of internal debate, had rushed towards Ash. With a spontaneity born of pure joy, she wrapped her arms around him, a gesture of closeness and relief. Ash's initial shock gave way to warmth, his cheeks flushing a deep shade of red, but soon he found himself embracing Serena fully, burying his face in her hair. Pikachu noted how the look on Ash's face the moment had been like the ones Ash displayed whenever he returned to the familiar embrace of his home in Pallet Town. As the two eventually parted, their arms lingered around each other, reluctant to break the connection. Pikachu, sensing the intimacy of the moment, discreetly moved back, giving them space. "I'm so happy you came," Serena had whispered, her words a soft and warm exhalation against Ash's cheek, sheer exhaustion weighing down her every word and movement. Ash's response had been a wide grin, his stance shifting as words found him. "You were amazing." Serena pulled back slightly, her gaze intent and probing. "Do you think I've reached it, Ash?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. Confused, Ash echoed, "Reached what?" Serena, her exhaustion lending her a dizziness that made her words more poignant, confessed, "Remember when I told you that you were my goal?" Ash nodded, a gesture more automatic than understanding, his mind racing to comprehend. Serena, now mere inches away, pressed, "Have I reached it? Reached my goal?" Ash found himself at a loss for words, the gravity of her question anchoring the moment in a seriousness that he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't until a beat too long had passed that he found a response. "Come on, let me walk you to your room." Pikachu, silent witness to their exchange, followed them, his gaze never straying from the pair. Ash had taken Serena's hand in his, a gesture so familiar and yet, under the night's heavy cloak of revelations, charged with a new significance. This time, however, Ash seemed to have forgotten to let go, or perhaps, chose not to. Their hands joined as if no space or silence could wedge them apart. It was only upon reaching her room in the castle that Serena gently pointed out their still entwined hands. Ash, startled, quickly withdrew his hand, but the action left a fleeting frown on Serena's face before she masked it with a laugh, a light, lilting sound that hid her true feelings. "Maybe not, then." Serena's voice held a tinge of sadness, her head shaking slightly as if to dispel a lingering doubt or dream. "Good night, Ash." Before Ash could find words or even fully grasp the moment, Serena leaned in, her lips brushing his cheek in a fleeting kiss that left him rooted to the spot, stunned. The warmth of her goodbye lingered as she turned, her figure retreating into the sanctuary of her room, the door closing softly behind her. Ash found himself standing there, staring at the closed door as if it might reopen, or as if the wood and paint could offer answers to the storm of thoughts whirling through his mind. That kiss had felt different from the first. That one had felt like an ending. Time seemed to stretch and warp, minutes ticking by unnoticed as he remained motionless, caught in a haze. It took him 10 long minutes to finally, reluctantly, pull himself away from her door, each step heavy with uncertainty and a sense of longing for something just out of the reach of his comprehension. From the corner of the hallway, Pikachu watched with empathy and frustration, a small groan escaping him, his own understanding of the complex emotions at play. The electric Pokémon had seen it all, the highs and lows of their reunion, and now shared in Ash's silent contemplation of a night that had promised so much yet left so many questions unanswered. Ash and Goh made their way into the bustling Vermilion City Pokémon Center, the familiar hum of activity and Pokémon chatter enveloping them. As they navigated through the crowd, Ash's gaze found Serena and Chloe near the public phones, a sight that sent a wave of nervous energy through him. He discreetly wiped his moist palms on his jeans, steeling himself for the encounter. Serena stood there, in an outfit similar to the one he'd seen her wear in Lilycove, her style unmistakable. She wore a sleeveless black top paired with a red patterned skirt that fluttered with her movements, topped off with a cute gray hat that added an air of casual elegance. When she turned and flashed Ash a smile, the young champion felt a mix of calm and a weird twist in his gut. Her smile was nice, but it didn't have that usual spark of excitement he was used to seeing whenever her eyes met his. Goh caught sight of Serena and shot Ash a look that sought to share his admiration. But Ash just brushed it off, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, trying not to make it obvious he was affected. Chloe, vibrant as ever, with her Eevee energetically bouncing around Serena's Sylveon, announced their arrival with a flourish. "Look who's here." Serena's attention shifted smoothly to Goh, her greeting marked by a blend of warmth and formality. "Hey, Goh. I know we already met briefly, but I'm Serena," she said, with a small nod and bow. "Chloe has told me so much about you, so it's nice to finally meet you." Goh, a bit caught off guard by the direct attention, gave a casual scratch to his cheek while Grookey jumped around, clearly excited. Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. Chloe wouldn't shut up about you for weeks after that time you helped her in Lily Cove. Chloe puffed out her cheeks, annoyed. Go, she exclaimed, though the sigh that followed softened her exasperation. She turned back to Serena, her smile returning. Well, that was 3 years ago. We've been friends ever since. Then, directing her gaze back at Goh, hands firmly placed on her hips, she reminded him, remember, I even told you I was going to see her perform in Kalos last week. Goh offered a sheepish grin, a bit cornered but taking it in stride. I guess so, he admitted, but you said, Kalos Queen, so how was I supposed to know that was the same person? Well, I guess you weren't. Chloe, biting the inside of her mouth, conceded, but Serena's won Kalos Queen twice now. Did you know that, Ash? Ash, caught off guard by the question, could only nod. His attention had been on the subtle way Serena seemed to keep her gaze averted, more so than usual. It struck him that maybe she was feeling nervous. Wanting to ease the tension, he searched for the right thing to say, to somehow bridge the gap that seemed to have formed since their last meeting. You bet I did. Ash's enthusiasm carried across the Pokemon Center as he punched the air triumphantly, his gaze locking with Serena's. Pikachu, caught up in the moment, cheered along from Ash's arms. I was there when she won the first time, she's amazing. Serena's attention shifted back to Ash, her smile small but filled with a quiet gratitude. I had no idea you were in town until Chloe told me, she murmured, the tone low, almost like an apology, suggesting she might have done things differently had she known. Ash, puzzled by why she would feel like apologizing, was quick to dispel any awkwardness. I'm so glad to see you, it's been too long. Really? The question faint, almost hesitant. Absolutely, Ash's reply was as immediate as it was genuine. He gave her another wide, toothy grin. Pikachu, sensing the warmth between the two, leapt from Ash's embrace into Serena's arms, an act that affirmed Ash's words. Serena caught the electric Pokemon, her touch gentle as she stroked his fur, a soft laugh escaping her as Pikachu nuzzled into her. The exchange between Ash and Serena eased into smiles that were effortless. The moment grew light, their smiles easy and unforced. So, you're here in Kanto just to see Chloe, or, Ash ventured, curiosity getting the better of him, though he wasn't quite sure why he felt the need to know. Serena, still cradling Pikachu, looked up. She asked me to come, she said, her words carrying a playful edge as she arched an eyebrow at Ash. She said there's this lantern festival tomorrow? Her gaze shifted to Chloe, seeking confirmation. Chloe, buzzing with excitement, snatched Go's soda straight from his grip, leaving him with a bit of a sulk. Yes. Serena mentioned she had a week off from her queenly duties and I so didn't want to be alone this weekend, so I figured, why not invite her to the Lantern Festival Vermilion City puts on for Valentine's Day every year? She paused, eyeing Ash and Go's clueless faces. Haven't you guys ever been? In all your 19 years living in Kanto? Go just shrugged, a bit sheepish. Nope, didn't really know Valentine's Day was a big deal until Oak filled us in. Chloe couldn't help but roll her eyes, though there was a playful jaunt to it. Honestly, not surprised, she said, mostly throwing the comment towards Serena. Then, flipping back to the guys. Well, Serena was nice enough to come all this way to keep me company. I didn't know you guys would be around, but you're more than welcome to join us for the festival tomorrow. Go's face lit up. Sweet, maybe we can share our poems then. Poems? Both Chloe and Serena repeated, clearly caught off guard by the mention. Before Ash could even think to intervene, Go blurted, yeah, when Oak told us about Valentine's Day, he said that we should do something nice for our friends and, since you all are in town, he got us to start writing poems for you. Mine's shaping up to be pretty impressive. Go grinned with emphasis, hands on his hips and bouncing on the tips of his toes. I'm sure, Chloe replied, her tone salted with skepticism as she sniffed. Valentine's Day is more a couple's thing, you know. Ash jumped in, quick to clarify, his words tumbling out as he snuck a look at Serena, who seemed fascinated with the floor, her cheeks a soft shade of pink. Oak also said it's for showing good friends here, appreciation. Whatever, Chloe said with an eye roll, but she linked arms with Serena, who was still cradling Pikachu with her free hand. Can't wait to see what you literary geniuses have to come up with anyway. But come on, Let's take Serena to the lab. I want to show her around. Serena perked up, her smile bright. That sounds wonderful. I've heard so much. Ash, seizing the moment to draw her attention back, chimed in with renewed passion. The lab is super awesome. You'll get to see some of my current Pokémon. Everyone's gonna be thrilled to meet you. Serena, her spirits lifted by Ash's eagerness and Pikachu now back on his shoulder, beamed. I can't wait, she said, her excitement mirroring his. Back at the labs, the atmosphere was alive with the kind of energy that only a place dedicated to Pokémon research could muster. Ash, full of pride, took the opportunity to introduce Serena to some of his team members who were currently with him. Dragonite, with its gentle giant demeanor. Lucario, exuding a calm strength. And Sirfetch'd, ever the noble warrior. He mentioned the rest were back at Oak's Ranch, a note of apology in his voice for not being able to showcase the entire team. As they meandered through the labs, yes, Goh and Chloe were still there, but noticeably realizing that they were definitely being forgotten about, Ash guided Serena through various sections, each dedicated to a different aspect of Pokémon care and research. They passed through a habitat simulation room, vibrant and alive with ecosystems tailored to different Pokémon types, and a health and rehabilitation center, where Pokémon received top-notch care and recovery treatments. The ease between Ash and Serena seemed to weave back around them as they caught up, filling in the gaps of the year that had stretched between their last meeting. Serena shared insights into her life as Kalo's queen, her responsibilities dotted with events, decision-making, and the occasional Pokémon battle for ceremonial purposes. Ash listened, his interest genuine, his questions thoughtful. Yes, Goh and Chloe were still there, now watching the two and exchanging glances every now and then, and wondering if they should interrupt. In turn, Ash regaled her with tales of his own journey, the duties that came with being a monarch, and how, despite the honor, some tasks felt mundane. Serena's laughter, light and good-natured, teased him about how it would only be natural that anything that didn't have to do with traveling and exploring new things would feel mundane to him. Laughing, Ash had to agree. Excitement took over Ash as he thought of the perfect spot to visit next, the Rhyhorn enclosure. In his eagerness, he gently grabbed Serena's wrist, guiding her with an enthusiasm he couldn't contain. The Rhyhorn, known for their tough exterior, were immediately taken with Serena, her presence, and clear experience with their kind, a calming force even among the most stubborn of creatures. Their journey through the labs continued, Ash's hand still absent-mindedly clasping Serena's wrist, a connection neither seemed eager to break. It was in this comfortable bubble that they stumbled upon Professor Oak. Oh! The professor expressed his surprise with a warm undertone, his eyes twinkling as he caught sight of the group. Why hello there everyone, Chloe. Good to see you again. I hear your travels have done you well. Hi, Professor. Chloe greeted him eagerly. They sure have. I'm competing at hyperclasses now. Oak's response was a hearty congratulations, his curiosity in Chloe's progress evident. But then, his gaze shifted towards Serena, not without giving Ash, barely concealing his admiration for the honey blonde, a playful eyebrow wiggle. Ash's face was an open book, his expression glowing under the lab's bright lights. And you, my dear, look familiar. Where have I seen you before? Oak mused, truly wondering. This is Serena. Ash couldn't contain his excitement, his voice bubbling over. However, his hand hastily retreated from Serena's wrist when he caught Oak's observant glance at their contact. She's Kalo's queen. Oak responded with a click of his tongue, visibly impressed by the introduction. My, Ash has always been one to surround himself with accomplished and pretty friends, he remarked, winking at Ash before turning to Serena with a respectful bow. It's so nice to meet you, my dear. You are as radiant as a Magmar's sunny day. Leaning closer to Ash, Oak whispered, take notes. Heat crept up Ash's neck. Professor, we heard about the poems, Serena continued playfully. That's very nice of you to push the boys to do something for us. Are you a poet yourself? Oak puffed up a bit, clearly pleased with the direction of the conversation. Well, I am actually. Researcher first, of course, but novice wordsmith second, he declared, his tone imbued with a mix of pride and modesty. Turning towards Ash, he gave a nudge and a wink. Ash couldn't help but roll his eyes at the exchange, a silent groan of embarrassment escaping him. As though to dispel some restrained energy, Chloe gave a dramatic twirl, Evie cradled in her arms. "We're going to the Lantern Festival tomorrow," she declared with a wide grin. "You better make sure Ash and Goh have their poems ready for us by then, Professor." Oak, clearly amused by the enthusiasm swirling around him, gave Ash and Goh a friendly slap on the shoulders. "I have no doubt they will. I'm actually penning a little poem myself, so perhaps we can all share some inspiration early tomorrow." Goh looked slightly less thrilled at the prospect and raised an eyebrow to indicate as much. "Wait, what?" Serena stepped forward with a ludic tilt of her head. "And who are you writing a poem for, Professor?" she asked, her hands clasped behind her back with charming interest. Oak rubbed the back of his neck. "I'd rather not say for now, not until I know they feel the same way." His words trailed off, leaving a hint of mystery in the air. The course of true love never did run smooth. Chloe, seizing the moment to whisk Serena away, spun her friend around by the shoulder, sticking her tongue out at Ash and Goh in a playful, "no boys allowed" gesture. "Come on, I'll show you my room," and back towards the two young men. "We'll see you guys at dinner tonight." As Chloe led her away, Serena cast a glance back at Ash, mouthing an "I'm sorry" through a wince, her regret at the sudden departure clear. Ash couldn't help but chuckle, folding his arms across his chest. Despite the lively banter and the sudden plan change, he found himself feeling pretty happy, but there was a tinge of disappointment too. He had been enjoying Serena's company, more than he'd realized until now. Watching her being led away by Chloe, a sudden realization hit him hard. He'd really missed her. The feeling lodged itself firmly in his chest with a pang that almost knocked the wind out of him. Oak, in a moment of mischief, leaned in far too close to Ash's ear with a whisper, "Just friends, eh? Friendship is constant in all other things, save in the affairs of love." Ash shivered. "Wait." Goh, catching this exchange, looked back and forth between Ash and Professor Oak, a dawning realization crossing his face as his blue eyes widened. "Serena's the girl you're writing a poem for." Both Ash and Oak snapped their attention to Goh, who was now staring at the professor with horror and disbelief. Oak, his face turning a shade paler, released an exasperated sigh and half-strangled, half-shoved Goh in disbelief. "What do you take me for? Of course not. How on earth did you arrive at that conclusion?" Goh, gasping for air, managed to stutter out, I was." Without further ado, Oak, in a move of desperation or perhaps inspiration, dragged both Goh and Ash into a nearby utility closet, the space cramped with scientific equipment and barely enough room for them and their Pokémon. Grookey and Pikachu found themselves squished between their respective trainers, their expressions as bewildered as their human counterparts. "Gentlemen," Oak, once settled, turned to Ash and Goh with a seriousness that filled the small closet. "Show me what you have." Goh, with what little space he had, crossed his arms defiantly. "I honestly haven't even started. I'm working concepts." Oak snorted. All eyes then turned to Ash, who felt the weight of the moment and a large sweat drop forming at the back of his skull. He began, scratching the side of his face. "I don't know. I'm still working on it too." Oak's frustration was clear as day. "Tomorrow morning, meet me in the cafeteria. We will have an official poetry workshop. Bring drafts." Ash and Goh, their faces marked with beads of sweat from the tension in the cramped quarters, nodded eagerly, anything to escape the closet's confines. As they were finally released from the utility closet, the promise of a poetry workshop loomed ahead, an unexpected turn in their weekend that neither had anticipated. Ash, with Pikachu comfortably perched on his shoulder, and Goh, Grookey making itself at home atop his head, found themselves stationed outside the lab. They were in that familiar stretch of waiting, the kind that had its own rhythm and pace, as the girls prepared for the evening ahead. Dinner with Chloe's parents had unfolded into an animated session of stories and laughter, with Serena at the center, captivating everyone with tales from her and Ash's time together in Kalos. Ash couldn't help but smile, lost in the nostalgia of the adventures they recounted, the challenges they had faced, and the victories and dreams they had shared. But when Serena had touched upon their farewell in Kalos, a subtle shift occurred. Ash's eyes, almost of their own accord, drifted to her lips, the memory igniting a fire that spread across his cheeks, flustering him. Caught in his recollection, Ash hadn't noticed Professor Seri's inquiring gaze until she voiced her concern, pulling him back to the present with a gentle, "Is something wrong?" Her observation had caught him off guard. his expression morphing from distant to dazed as he scrambled for composure. With a bit of stammering and a quick laugh, Ash assured everyone around the table that he had been fine. More than fine. Awesome. His insistence was met with amusement and skepticism, but eventually, the conversation moved on, leaving Ash to quietly collect himself. Throughout this exchange, only Pikachu had remained unfazed, smirking into his bowl of ketchup, the electric Pokemon's sharp eyes missing nothing. He seemed to understand the unspoken undercurrents of Ash's emotion better than anyone else at the moment. "Hey. Sorry to keep you guys waiting," Chloe announced brightly through the quiet evening air, drawing the boys' attention. She descended the steps with Serena, Eevee and Sylveon in tow, their smiles as wide as ever. "Just wanted to make sure Mom didn't need help with the dishes." As the maroon-haired girl spoke, she shot Serena a look that seemed to hold an entire conversation, causing the performer to blush, a clear sign that the girls had exchanged some sort of secret between them. The group had agreed earlier to take Serena on a nighttime tour of Vermilion City, given its reputation for beautiful seafront views and budding nightlife, especially with the Lantern Festival preparations underway. As they wandered towards the docks, they were greeted by the sight of vendors setting up stalls and lanterns beginning to dot the landscape, each one a promise of the festivities to come. The hum of activity blended seamlessly with the gentle lap of waves against the harbor while a soft breeze brought along the scent of salt from the sea. Their exploration took them to a nearby park, a decision made in part to allow their Pokémon some time to stretch and play before bed. The park, with a little playground and a splash pad that glistened under the streetlights, seemed to enthuse the familiars. Pancham, Sylveon, Pikachu, Grookey, Cinderace, and Eevee eagerly bounced around the swings and in the water, their antics ranging from chasing each other around the pad to more coordinated games that seemed to spring from their deep bonds with each other and their trainers. Meanwhile, Delphox and Inteleon looked on, their arms crossed, both clearly acting as babysitters. When Grookey got the idea to splash Delphox with water, he was sorry, very sorry, especially when Delphox used hidden power to hold Grookey's face over the most powerful part of the fountain. Meanwhile, Ash, Serena, Chloe, and Goh sat on benches off to the side, ice cream cones in hand, watching the Pokémon play. After a little, Chloe suddenly popped up from her seat, her dessert gone like it was never there. "Okay, we're off to grab some water," she announced, snagging Goh by his hoodie in a swift move that left no room for argument. She shot Serena a look that seemed to say 1,000 words, but Serena tried to shrug it off, finding a sudden interest with the hem of her skirt, as Chloe dragged Goh away. That left Ash and Serena on their own, silently enjoying the sight of their Pokémon having the time of their lives. Serena, her ice cream looking more like a melting mess, eventually stood to toss it in the nearest bin. Ash couldn't help but watch her go, partly sorry he couldn't finish her ice cream, but mostly realizing that he found even the simplest things she did kind of fascinating at the moment. When she came back, Ash jumped up, a bit too eagerly, and fumbled through his pockets. He managed to pull out a wad of napkins, all crumpled and a bit worse for wear, and offered them to her with a toothy grin. "Here, in case you got any ice cream on you," he said, trying to be helpful but also just looking for an excuse to talk to her. Serena smiled as she took them. "I didn't even know you used napkins, Ash," she teased, taking the tissue and wiping her sticky hands from the dessert. "Oh, I got those for you." He rubbed his nose. "I didn't need them. I ate every bite." "I saw." Serena's eyes glimmered with amusement. They settled back into their seats, the atmosphere around them easing into a comfortable silence once more. This time, they found themselves sitting a bit closer on the bench than before. However, after a moment, Ash stirred. "It really has been too long," he murmured with a strange inflection. He thought about why he hadn't reached out, how it was that his mind only ever seemed to really hold one thing at a time. The last time they'd been together in Kalos, despite that night he'd walked her to her room, had really been some of his best recent memories. Even the rest of the weekend after she'd been crowned had been amazing. Whatever awkwardness from that one night had been dispelled by Serena's warm smile the next day. Sure, looking back the smile had not necessarily been as bright, but it seemed as though they'd come to some understanding. And Ash, Serena, Bonnie, and Clemont had spent the next couple days touring Glory with the now Kalos Queen, accompanying her to every press conference, party, and other meet and greets she had needed to get done. Ash had actually loved it. He'd loved seeing Serena so happy. And he loved being there for her, standing beside her while she took questions from her adoring fans, thwarting the advances of overly enthusiastic admirers. There was something satisfying about knowing his presence made a difference, especially in warding off weird guys who'd wanted to get close to her. But either way, it had been in these moments, standing beside Serena, that Ash realized just how much he enjoyed being part of her world. "We've both been pretty busy, it seems." Serena eventually nodded at Ash's words, meanwhile, her gaze fixed straight ahead as though she were trying very hard to concentrate. Ash's mouth twisted at the corners, unsettled by that. Yeah, but still. He never wanted his adventures to ever get in the way of friends, but it seemed like that was always the case. Of course, he hadn't really cared that much before, but he was starting to care now. "I've, been thinking about you." That wasn't entirely true, nor was it entirely not true. Ash had been thinking about Serena often since that weekend, but he had also been trying not to think about her as, again, he had found that thinking about her kind of depressed him. When Serena's attention snapped to him as if trying to read between the lines of his face, Ash, caught in the moment, offered a sheepish smile, and stuffed his hands in his pockets. Serena laughed, edged with nerves, and she looked down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "And what have you been thinking when you think about me?" She looked back up with patient blue eyes. Ash was definitely caught off guard by the question and he colored. He looked away from her and stared very hard at Pikachu, who seemed to be keeping one eye on them. "Well, a lot of things," he confessed, removing his cap for a moment as though to examine it, then he grinned at her. "Your desserts." Serena looked disappointed and amused all at once. "I see," she seemed to echo from a far-off place, and Ash knew he was losing her. Trying to draw her back to him, he blurted, "And the ribbon." That seemed to work. Serena's eyes refocused on his face and she waited for him to explain. Shakily, Ash replaced his hat onto his tousled hair. His cheeks puffed out as he allowed a slow breath to ease out of his chest. "I, wonder why you don't wear it anymore." The honey blonde tilted her head slightly as if she was piecing together the unsaid parts of Ash's statement. She pursed her lips. "Why do you wonder that, Ash?" "Because when that ribbon reminds me of the kiss," was Ash's immediate thought, and again he felt his mouth go dry and his lips begin to tingle as though she had pressed herself against him only seconds ago. The memory just as vivid in his mind as when the moment happened. "Because it reminds me of us in our journey," Ash eventually found himself saying, trying very hard not to stare at Serena's slightly parted mouth. "And I thought it was special to you." Serena looked a bit taken back, her fingers widening around the edge of the bench, her grip revealing a strange conflict inside her. "It is special to me," she murmured, so faintly Ash had to inch closer to catch the delicate words. "I just knew that I needed to put it away for a little while I was traveling and trying to define who I was for myself, if that makes sense." Ash eyed her and nodded, so close that his cheek almost brushed hers. He made no effort to lean away. "I still have it," she offered with a small smile, her breath mingling with his. "It reminds me of us in our journey, too, Ash. And how grateful I am for everything you've taught me. How grateful I am to you for inspiring me. I wouldn't have gotten to where I am without it, without you." Ash shook his head. "That's not true. You." Serena raised a finger and pressed it to his lips, a soft, yet somewhat sad giggle escaping her. "It is true," she continued, her voice still low as she removed her hand. "Ash, you are a huge part of my childhood and I wouldn't change it for the world. You were my goal for so long. But I do feel like I've changed. Like I could take on the future by myself with all the new things I've learned if I had to. I don't need you anymore." Ash blinked. He had never thought Serena had ever needed him, he had never wanted her to need him, but then why did her words hurt so much? Why did he suddenly seem frozen in place, like that everything in him was sinking? Looking away, Serena's gaze dropped to her hands. "I still have the ribbon, Ash. But I do sometimes wonder if I should let it go." Ash felt a sudden chill, like the air around him had gone cold. He realized Serena wasn't just talking about the ribbon, she was hinting at something bigger, something that tied them together. "Serena, what do you mean?" he asked, almost urgently. He had to get to the bottom of this, to really understand what she was trying to say. It felt like there was something big on the line, and he needed to know. Serena looked pained, but then understanding seemed to dawn on her. For a moment she looked frustrated, her mouth twisting into a tense smile while her brows furrowed. Everyone told me I would have to be obvious, but I didn't think I'd have to be this obvious. She then turned on the bench so that her whole body faced him, a new confidence seemingly surging through her. Ash, Goh and Chloe reappeared, each holding a couple of water bottles, breaking the intimate bubble that had enveloped Ash and Serena. Startled by their sudden return, Ash and Serena instinctively pulled apart, a mutual realization of their closeness causing a fleeting awkwardness between them. Chloe's gaze lingered on them for a moment, an unspoken question in her eyes, before she deliberately turned away, directing her attention to the Pokémon frolicking near the splash pad. "We should probably head out, huh? It's getting pretty late," Chloe mentioned, breaking the lingering tension as she glanced at the sky, the waxing moon nearly full and shining down with an intense, stark light. There was a general murmur of agreement, and the group began the process of recalling their Pokémon. Ash and Serena, now standing deliberately at opposite ends of the group, avoided each other's gaze, the air between them charged with the unsaid. The walk back was quiet, a bare contrast to the lively atmosphere they had left behind. Chloe filled the silence with talk of the next day's plans and her excitement for the Lantern Festival, her voice a constant stream that neither Ash nor Serena seemed able to tap into. The night wrapped around them, its calm only broken by Chloe's enthusiastic chatter, leaving Ash and Serena lost in their thoughts, each pondering the unspoken words and the sudden distance that now lay between them. In the quiet of the night, Ash found himself ensnared in a relentless cycle of restlessness. With every toss and turn, his mind replayed the day's conversation with Serena, each word echoing with her gratitude and his unresolved feelings. The phrases, "How grateful I am," and "But I've changed," bounced around the walls of his mind, interspersed with her haunting question, "I wonder if I should let it go." The emotional undercurrent of their exchange left Ash uneasy, a knot of confusion and longing constricting him. "Don't let go," he seemed to want to shout, even though he wasn't totally sure what she was letting go of, or what he was asking her to hold on to. Ash then took hold of a pillow and smothered his own face in frustration. He felt like the knot in his chest was just growing bigger and bigger. Pikachu, stirred by the restless energy, sniffed the air. Concern was flickering in his eyes when the yellow rodent noticed the notebook on the desk. In a determined scramble, Pikachu picked it up and approached Ash, dropping the notebook onto his trainer's face. Ash winced, the sharp pain jolting him. Yet, seeing Pikachu nod with encouragement softened the moment. "What am I even supposed to write?" he whispered into the silence, cautious not to wake Goh, whose snores filled the room. Saying stuff felt so easy. Writing them down made everything so real. Pikachu, came the comforting pat on Ash's forearm. Pikachu's tone, though simple, carried an encouragement that spoke directly to Ash's heart. Sighing, Ash stared at the notebook before rising. He turned on the lamp, bathing the desk in a soft light, and seated himself. Pikachu watched silently, a steadfast presence in the small hours, as Ash penned down his feelings, untangled and pure. It wasn't a poem. Not exactly, but it was how Ash felt. And no one could really ask the boy to write much more than that. The morning light filtered into the lab cafeteria, casting a soft glow over the breakfast table where Ash, Goh, and Oak had gathered. Ash's eyes bore the weight of a sleepless night, shadowed and weary from hours spent entangling new feelings for Serena. Yet, alongside the exhaustion, there was a spark of excitement, a palpable thrill at the clarity dawn had brought. He was eager, almost buzzing with the need to share his revelations. Oak sat before his breakfast, an array of traditional dishes neatly arranged, steamed rice, a perfectly rolled omelet, and thin sheets of nori. He looked up, his brown eyes twinkling with enthusiasm as he declared, "Today's the day. The sacred day of love and affection." But of course, he quickly amended, waving his chopsticks for emphasis, "In your case the day of friendship and gratitude. Either way, what have you all written? Let me guide your poetic endeavors. I, of course, shall go first." With a flourish, Oak produced a large notebook, its pages crammed with scribblings and notes. He began to recite from it, launching into what seemed to be a 20-page epic, a narrative so grand it threatened to dwarf the cafeteria's morning hum. Ash and Goh, along with Pikachu and Grookey, settled in for the performance, their initial interest quickly waning as Oak's recitation filled the room. With each stanza, their enthusiasm deflated, boredom manifesting in a collective sweat drop that trickled down their faces. Pikachu and Grookey exchanged glances, their expressions mirroring the boys' growing dismay. Oak, oblivious to the dwindling attention of his audience, continued with fervor. His voice lilting at the overly melodic lines, he delivered each verse with a proud and loud intonation that began to attract curious and amused glances from other cafeteria patrons. The boys squirmed under the weight of these looks, their embarrassment mounting as Oak's epic unfolded, a relentless stream of passion and prose that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. In the midst of a field where the wild pidgey play, stood a maiden whose eyes outshone the light of day. Her hair, a cascade of autumn's own fire, set ablaze every heart, fueled by desire. Her gaze, piercing as a beedrill's sting, yet gentle as a butterfree's wing, could tame the fiercest dragonite's roar, leaving it docile, wanting more. With steps as graceful as a standler in stride, she walked through the meadows, the flowers her guide. Each bloom bowed down, in reverence, in awe, at the beauty and grace that they saw. As Oak recited these lines with a fervor unmatched, the cafeteria audience was treated to a spectacle of poetic ambition that danced precariously between profound and preposterous. Ash, caught between politeness and sheer discomfort, managed a smile that was both genuine and strained. "That was really great, Professor," he said, scratching the back of his head in his attempt to find the right words without offending the proud poet. Goh, less concerned with the nuances of critique and more eager to move past the epic recital, seized his moment. With his mouth still full from a hurried bite of breakfast, he spoke with an enthusiasm that was as much about showcasing his own work as it was about shifting the spotlight. "Okay, my turn," he declared, rice grains flying. Grookey, ever the helpful companion, had already anticipated Goh's need. With a swift and agile movement, it reached into Goh's backpack, retrieving the notebook with a drama that matched the occasion. "Chloe, you roll your eyes a lot because you think my facts are boring. You're an encyclopedia of size and whatnot, but at least you're cool at coordinating. That's a plus. I'll be your ride or die or bust." "That is," Oak swallowed hard and forced a grin, "rather quite something, Goh. You seem to, have a knack for rhyming?" Grookey, perched proudly beside Goh, mirrored his trainer's confidence with a display of its own jubilant pride. Goh, smirking, leaned back slightly and folded his arms across his chest. "Yeah, poetry comes pretty easily to me." Professor Oak, caught between admiration and despair, muttered under his breath, "Blessed among mortals, you are," turning to Ash with a grimace. Bracing himself for perhaps another round of well-intentioned but potentially misguided verses, Oak suggested, "Do you have anything to share, Ash? You know, I'm beginning to think if maybe you all should just get them cards." "Professor," Ash began, tentative as he fiddled with his chopsticks, picking up individual grains of rice. "My poem might actually be about someone who, might be more than a friend." The admission hung in the air, charged with a sudden shift in energy. Both Oak and Goh, taken aback by the unexpected revelation, turned to each other, their surprise quickly morphing into realization. Oak, leaning in with renewed interest and a hint of enthusiasm he was obviously trying to restrain, pressed, "So you want to write a love poem?" Ash winced. "Well, maybe. How would you describe love, Professor? I'm not sure I've really understood it, but when I'm around Serena I just feel different." He hoped love wasn't all like what Oak had written, because that seemed a little over the top. But the professor seemed to speak about it a lot, so surely he had to know something. Mischievously, Goh leaned in with a glint in his eyes. "From what Chloe told me, that's called puberty, Ash, and all it means is that you want to get." Before the city boy could finish, Oak's hand shot across the table, connecting with the back of Goh's head in a swift, corrective slap. The sound punched the air, a clear boundary set by the elder. Oak, smoothing the front of his lab coat, resettled into his seat with a composed air. "Love, my dear boy, is, well, why do we not let the poets tell you?" he recited. "Love is like the wild rose briar, friendship like the holly tree. The holly is dark when the rose briar blooms, but which will bloom most constantly?" Does that make it more clear? Oak appeared hopeful. Ash and Goh exchanged glances. They shook their heads, the poet's analogy soaring over them, uncaught. With a sigh, Oak leaned back. "The education system these days," he paused, searching for clarity. "Love is like a wild rose briar. Beautiful and passionate but potentially painful and can cause a pain." "Like in your chest?" Ash asked excitedly. Oak nodded kindly. "Yes. like in your chest or your heart. Whereas friendship, symbolized by the evergreen holly tree, represents durability, reliability, and constancy. Both often exist together. While love may offer intense moments of joy and pain, it is the friendship underneath that provides unwavering support and companionship throughout life. So, Ash, thinking very hard, even Pikachu scratched his head. Love often comes from being friends. Oak, with a raised finger, friendship is often a necessity. Now how do you know you've moved from a friendship and into a stage of love? Consider how this Paldine poet describes it. Love is a fire that burns unseen, a wound that aches yet isn't felt. An always contentment, a pain that rages without hurting. Ash, a bit in a daze, a fire, he thought of the kiss, and how the thought of kissing Serena again ignited something like a fire within him. Something unquenchable. Oak continued, with a newfound sympathy for the boy, the Paldine describes love as a powerful, unseen fire, a pain that is deeply felt though not physically manifested. It is like that pain in your chest that you describe, because when you fall in love you grow discontent with the way things are. That is because if the person you love just considers you a friend, you can't help but want more. Love is an intense, invisible force, Ash. You often don't know you're being burned until you've been set ablaze. And often you can never see that person the same way again. Ash and Pikachu locked eyes. And then Ash nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face as if the professor's words had finally clicked into place. Meanwhile, Goh and Grookey, still enshrouded in their bubble of bewilderment, only looked more confused. They shrugged, dismissing the conversation as one of those mysteries yet to be unraveled. Turning back to their plates, they continued to eat, content in their cluelessness. The smile continued to spread across Ash's face. The pain in his chest hadn't diminished, but he finally felt like he had clarity. Real clarity. Serena had been his friend for a long time, but ever since she had kissed him, she had planted the first rose briar, and ever since then, her roots had slowly been working over him, taking over. "I have to go," Ash exclaimed, a burst of energy propelling him from his seat with urgency, overwhelming him. Pikachu, ever the supportive companion, cheered, their shared excitement tangible in the air. With the notebook clutched tightly, Ash stretched out his arm for Pikachu to climb before dashing out of the cafeteria. "But wait. What about your—" Oak trailed off, swallowed by the distance as Ash and Pikachu's footsteps echoed down the hall, growing fainter with each passing second. Oak's concern, perhaps for unfinished breakfast or unspoken advice, lingered in the air, unanswered. Ash, driven by a newfound purpose, didn't look back, his thoughts already reaching out to Serena. The Lantern Festival was a spectacle of light and color. The harbor of Vermilion City transformed for the occasion. Oversized, whimsical lanterns, some in the shapes of Pokémon, floated above the crowd, their warm twinkle casting a cheerful radiance over the festivities. Strings of small lights crisscrossed between the temporary booths and storefronts, adding a starry overhead sparkle that mirrored a clear night sky. Ash and Goh stood just outside the festival gates, the young champion shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The two had been sent on a mission by Chloe to secure tickets, and now they found themselves amidst a throng of festival goers. Ash exchanged nervous glances with Pikachu, whose confident grin and enthusiastic thumbs-up were meant to bolster his trainer's spirits. Ash self-consciously adjusted his black jacket, a choice made by Goh, who had helped Ash get dressed for the occasion. The champion's outfit was a departure from Ash's typical vibrant attire, but the black jeans, black shirt, and jacket combination gave him a sleek look that was drawing looks. His hat remained a staple, a touch of personal style amidst the monochrome. The attention from passers-by was unexpected. He seemed to be drawing the glances of many girls, which really only made him hope that Serena would like the way he looked. Of course, he had not been prepared, and he really should have been, to really like the way she looked. As the crowd ebbed and flowed with the festival's rhythm, two figures emerged, Evie and Sylveon trotting loyally beside them. Chloe and Serena stepped free from the throng of people. Ash's eyes instinctively found Serena, and for a moment, the vibrant lanterns above seemed to dim in comparison to her. His gaze traced her silhouette, taking in the elegance of the short black dress that hugged her frame. It was strapless, a style that was both simple and striking, allowing her natural beauty to shine without competition. The accessories she chose were understated yet poignant, a dainty necklace that caught the light just so, laying gracefully along her collarbone. A red headband nestled in her golden hair, a pop of color that matched the red purse clasped in her hand. Ash, caught unprepared by the wave of admiration washing over him, felt a sudden heat in his cheeks. He really should have prepared himself, but here he was, unexpectedly entranced, his heart beating a rhythm to match the low drums of the festival. As Serena moved through the crowd, Ash couldn't help but notice the glances she attracted from many men along the way, their eyes drawn to her like venomoths to a flame. A protective instinct flared within him, and without a second thought, Ash closed the distance between them to stand by her side, his presence a subtle barrier to redirect their attention. "Hey, guys!" Ash's greeting carried a hint of overzealousness as he waved them down, his eyes locking with Serena's. "You look great," he smiled. Chloe's reaction came as a soft giggle, clearly finding something about Ash's behavior funny. Serena, however, returned his smile with a touch of grace under her evident blush. "Thanks, Ash," she said, tinged with a warmth that matched her cheeks. "Why, you look good too. So do you, Pikachu," she added quickly as though trying to turn her attention to something else. Go, energized and holding tickets up, approached the group with a burst of enthusiasm. "We have the tickets. You all ready to go in?" His rally was met with enthusiastic nods and cheers from everyone. From Go's head, Grookey clapped excitedly and waved their group along. As they entered, the festival unfolded before them in a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Booths lined the pathways, each offering a unique slice of the celebration. They passed by stalls draped in vibrant fabrics, selling handmade jewelry, trinkets that sparkled under the strings of lights overhead. The air was heady with all kinds of aromas. The char of yakitori grilling over open flames, the sweetness of taiyaki in whimsical shapes, the airy lightness of cotton candy, which Go eagerly bought, its strands catching the light like morning dew on spiderwebs. Around them, couples wove through the crowd with shared glances and intertwined fingers. Laughter bubbled up, a natural soundtrack to the vignettes of closeness that dotted the festival landscape. Amid all this, the lanterns caught Ash's eye. Hanging from booths, they glowed softly, their surfaces etched with scenes of all kinds of motifs, from dragon Pokemon to flowers and vines. The craftsmanship spoke of traditions and stories passed down through generations, each lantern a little beacon in the twilight. Pikachu, seizing the moment, darted from Ash's shoulder to join Sylveon and Eevee, who were both congregated around a huge cotton candy stick Grookey struggled to hold in his ape-like hands. "What are all the lanterns for anyway?" Ash's curiosity broke through the din. Chloe, teasing Go by snagging a piece of his cotton candy, explained, "The lanterns are to symbolize true love. If you're single, you send up a lantern by yourself and hope it finds the one you're meant to be with. But if you're a couple, you send one up together for eternal happiness, or something." Go scoffed. "Sounds really stupid." His mockery earned a quick push from Chloe, landing him in a nearby bush. Ash, caught in the middle, hesitated, his reply a murmur of agreement. Then Serena's voice cut through, clear and filled with wonder. "That sounds really cute. I would love to do that." Her gaze, wide and full with the light of countless lanterns, found each of their faces, inviting them into her moment of enchantment. At Serena's enthusiastic embrace of the tradition, Ash felt a chill cascade through him, his blood turning cold at the thought. The thought of Serena releasing a lantern into the sky, with the chance it might symbolize her finding someone else, was not good. He didn't like the idea, not one bit. "Me too." Chloe chimed in, her green eyes darting around. She shot Ash a sly look, an unspoken tease in her glance. "Should we go find a cute one to send up?" Her suggestion acted as a spark, igniting a flurry of activity. Serena's response was immediate, her cheer leading the charge as the girls darted off in search of the perfect lantern. "Hey! Wait up!" Ash called out, urgency etched across his cheeks as he sprinted after them. Go, with twigs sticking out of his hair, and Pikachu, Sylveon, Eevee, and Grookey in tow, followed at a more leisurely pace, still happily enjoying their dessert. Throughout much of the night, Ash hovered close to Serena. He went back and forth between feeling incredibly nervous, excited, conflicted, the poem burning a hole in his pocket. He wondered when the best time would be to read it to her, but also wondering if he should read it at all. Who even was he, anyway? Writing poems. Him.
Since when did he read poetry to anyone anyway? Wasn't that just too sappy?
Suddenly Serena turned and grabbed Ash's arm, and immediately he felt like he'd read her 1,000 poems if it meant making her happy. Ash. They're selling Pokepuffs over there. Can you believe it? She breathed. Her enthusiasm was infectious. We have to try them and buy some for the Pokemon. Ash chuckled and nodded. Let's do it, he declared with a determined fist, and then he grabbed her by the hand. Not the wrist. The hand, intentionally intertwining his fingers with hers with a boldness he didn't know he possessed. He thought he felt her shiver. We're going to go over here, Chloe said enigmatically. Going where? Goh looked around as though to figure out what Chloe was talking about. Oh my gosh. You're so. Chloe dragged Goh away by his collared shirt, bringing the Pokemon along. Excerpt for Pikachu and Sylveon, who lurked with excited grins, eagerly to watch what would unfold next between their trainers. The world seemed to narrow to the space between Ash and Serena as they stood in line for the Pokepuffs, shoulder to shoulder, his every sense attuned to her. His hold was firm, yet gentle, attentive. Every so often, his gaze drifted to her face, catching any reaction, any smile that danced across her lips. Serena, for her part, seemed drawn into the same orbit, her attention fixed on Ash as they moved together. A few feet away, Pikachu and Sylveon shared a secretive look, their eyes gleaming, their quiet snickers lost in the sounds of the festival. When the Pokepuffs were finally in their grasp, Serena reached into the paper bag and presented one to Ash. He eagerly took it from her hands and bit into the treat, his stomach sending up a growl that made Serena giggle. Satisfaction spread across his face, though his eyes remained on Serena, seeking her reaction. It's good, he muttered, his mouth full and lips coated in powdered sugar, but it's nowhere near as good as yours. Here, try it. Serena's laughter filled the air, light and genuine, as she playfully reached for the half-eaten Pokepuff. Ash pulled back, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Ash, his grin wide, shifted from foot to foot, the nervous energy of a young boy caught in a moment of boldness. You'll, get your hands dirty. Here, I'll just give it to you, he motioned, revealing that he intended to plop the treat directly into Serena's mouth. Color bloomed across Serena's cheeks, a vivid display of embarrassment and anticipation. She nodded mutely, leaning forward, her lips parting. With a clumsy eagerness, Ash pushed the Pokepuff towards her, his aim less than perfect. The treat landed messily against her mouth, his fingers grazing her lips in the process. His own cheeks matched the hue of hers as he laughed. Ash. Serena squealed as she could feel the powdered sugar smearing all over her chin. She tried to delicately wipe the remnants by pinching her bottom lip with her thumb and index finger. However, as she chewed the dessert and swallowed, a knowing look entered her eyes. You're right, they're not as good as. She was cut off by Ash, who'd taken his thumb to wipe the corner of her mouth. You, missed a spot, he offered, the touch sending another jolt through his body and his eyes lowered to her lips, still parted now in shock. The moment lingered, suspended in the soft glow of festival lights, both of them locked in a sudden, intimate quiet. Ash's words, barely a whisper, hung in the air, tinted with embarrassment. The simple touch, unintended in its intimacy, had fixed them both to place and they remained frozen, the world around them blurring into insignificance. Pikachu thought he was going to die right there and then, peering at the scene through the gap between his paws. Sylveon, in contrast, sighed with contentment, resting her head on her legs as she lay there looking on with romantic, slow blinks. Ash finally broke the silence with a rough whisper as he cleared his throat, an attempt to regain some composure. Come on. Let's go find a lantern. As they wandered among the booths, their earlier closeness carried in the space between them. Lanterns of every shape and hue beckoned, their light casting shadows and saturating everything in gold. Serena's eyes danced over the array, her enthusiasm tempered by a newfound hesitancy that subdued her movement. Despite this, the honey blonde did eventually choose one, almost distractedly, its design simple, unassuming. Ash noticed a shift in Serena's attitude, the excitement that had sparkled in her eyes now dimmed by some kind of shadow. The act of sending up a lantern seemed to weigh on her as she chewed on her lower lip, a sign of her sudden, internal conflict. Ash watched her fingers clench and unclench over the paper light. Before long, Ash and Serena found themselves on a secluded dock extending into the harbor, momentarily escaping the festival's clamor. The full moon cast a serene glow over the water, turning the waves into a canvas of shimmering light. Pikachu found comfort in Ash's lap, settling in with a sigh, while Sylveon draped a ribbon-like feeler around Serena's wrist, offering silent support as the performer stroked the fairy-type's fur in thoughtful caresses. They sat together in a comfortable silence, the gentle lapping of water against the dock and the muffled festivities in the distance creating soft hum. The lantern Serena had chosen sat unlit beside her. Ash eyed it warily. Turning towards her, the boy opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat, lost to the sight of Serena bathed in moonlight. It highlighted the softness of her skin, the depth in her eyes, casting her in some angelic light that really took his breath away. "Serena," he whispered slowly, his dark eyes searching, "you really are very beautiful." Ash didn't think he had called anything beautiful in his life, but he suddenly knew what beauty looked like. And he wished he could explain to Serena that she wasn't just beautiful because of how she looked tonight, but because of who she was. Kind, strong, amazing. But he simply didn't know how to speak right now. And so the words hung in the air between them as the night held its breath. Serena's face lit up again with a warm glow, her flush dusting a rosy color over the pallor of her cheek. She reached up, perhaps to hide her embarrassment or to brush away a stray lock of hair, but Ash was quicker. His hand enveloped hers while his face held a wide, toothy grin. Sylveon and Pikachu, sensing the shift in the air, chose to retreat. "I know what you meant now, Serena." Ash started with an intensity that suddenly caused him to grip her hand to the point it was almost painful. "Remember that night? When you won Kalos Queen the first time, and you asked me about your goal? If you had reached it?" Serena nodded numbly, seemingly at a loss, her brow furrowed. "And the ribbon?" Ash kept going, almost out of breath, taking her other hand in his. "And how you said you wondered about letting it go? The ribbon has to do with your goal, right?" Ash. Serena seemed to be trying desperately to find words, syllables, even. "Well," Ash released one of her hands to pull something out of his pocket, something crumbled and overworked. "I have a poem that, clearing his throat, that, might give you some of those answers. Do you, want to hear it?" Serena's response was as immediate as it was fervent. "Yes."
Ash kept grinning, releasing her other hand now to unfurl the words and keep them steady in his shaky hands. He swallowed hard. Who knew he'd be this nervous? And he began to read.
It was not a good poem. Not at all. But if Ash managed anything, it was mustering up a series of heartfelt phrases that made sense only to him and Serena, no matter how jumbled and disorienting they might seem to anyone else. That hardly mattered, of course, as some words between lovers are really meant only to be shared between the two in which the love exists. However, here is more or less what was spoken. In the poem, Ash spoke about the kiss, how it had really made him dizzy at the time, how he'd forgotten it, or tried to forget it, but how whenever he had thought of her from then on, her lips always seemed to find his again. The kiss was like that snowball, were his words, or something like that. Serena understood what he meant. He next talked about seeing her in Lilycove, how she had looked so calm and serene, he'd said, looking out over the water, and how she had reminded him to never give up, and made him believe that something would be waiting for him after everything was all over. And he had compared her to his home in Pallet Town. At the mention of, Ash had paused to insert how much he wanted to bring her there, because having her be there at his home just made sense. The next stanza followed Ash's memories of their last time in Kalos together, seeing her crowned as Kalos Queen. "I couldn't have been more happy and proud of you," he read, looking up at her from time to time to see how she was taking everything. Needless to say, Serena was barely holding herself together. But Ash went on, talking about how he'd loved spending time with her, because again she was like a peaceful lake, he could just sink in, or something to that degree. Around her, everything that worried him really seemed to fade. And Ash admitted how much he'd loved holding her when they danced, and how if he had known how he'd felt back then, "I would have kissed you over and over again," on the night she'd won, because that's what he'd truly wanted to do after walking her to her room. "You were my goal too," he read, smiling up at her and taking one of her hands, which he noticed was trembling. "I just didn't know it yet." Finally, he addressed the ribbon. He wondered aloud if he was too late, his smile faltering as he read those last words. "I know you don't need me," he read slowly, clenching his jaw over the line, repeating her words back to her, "but I want you to choose me." And he had followed this up with some kind of comparison to choosing a Pokemon, which made Pikachu and Sylveon, who were obviously eavesdropping, sweat drop. Ash pushed on, however, clinging to the ribbon that was a symbol for their bond and for their friendship, which was once a tree, but now had roses. It was clear in Serena's face how she didn't quite follow that metaphor exactly, but she nodded along patiently, her hand still in his. "Please don't let it go," Ash read, talking about the pale blue fabric, apologizing for not realizing how he felt sooner, but realizing how he felt now. "Don't let us go." And that was more or less how he ended it, with images of the ribbon, and wanting Serena to always wear it, because "I love you," he said, shaking, and swallowing and not sure where to look. "I love you, and I know now that you once loved me." At this point Ash was struggling to read his own handwriting. I'm sorry for making you wait." Ash finished his poem and looked back up at Serena, whose eyes seemed to be veiled by a thin sheen of moisture. She tried laughing, but the sound came out stifled and strained. Ash began to grow a little worried, until, for the second time, but for utterly different reasons, Serena grabbed him by his jacket and brought his lips to hers. Ash's mind melted. The kiss was clumsy but earnest. Lips met in a dance neither had mastered, nor even knew, sometimes catching each other with accidental nips, sometimes missing and forming awkward pauses, but always seeking a rhythm they could call their own. Ash, driven by a mixture of instinct and desire to connect more deeply, tentatively guided the kiss, his hand cradling the back of Serena's head, fingers threading through her gold hair with gentle uncertainty. And as their mouths continued to move together, guided by the pull of feelings too powerful to ignore, Ash felt like he was sinking deeper into her, feeling a slight quench to the fire she'd started all those years ago. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, the sensation of the kiss lingered. Ash could hardly remember how it all happened. All he knew was that his lips came away very wet and a little sore. And then he felt a feeling so deep he wanted to dive right back into the embrace of her mouth, immediately, but held himself back, the two breathing heavily and still inches apart.
"Ash, I love you." Ash blinked, trying to refocus his gaze, anchoring himself to her eyes. "Yeah."
Serena laughed, this time the sound came out very light and so happy. She nodded, smiling. She looked down and bit her bottom lip which had already begun to swell. "Ash, I never stopped loving you. Not really. I mean, I know I'm not wearing your ribbon, but I still have it. I would never give it up. It reminds me of our dreams to be the best," she hummed with a dreamy sigh. To any observer she looked like a blushing queen, indeed, all flushed and incandescently aglow, even though I knew it was probably silly. "I'm so glad," Ash declared, raising a fist, and for a second he didn't know if he was replying to her loving him, the ribbon, or both. But probably both. "Serena, I can't believe it, I mean, you're so awesome." Serena snickered, sensing that whatever romantic words Ash had for her probably ended at that poem. But it was clear she didn't care, she wouldn't have had it any other way. "Ash," Serena began, a little shyly, taking his hand, clearly she found it strange to have the freedom to do so. "So when did you realize you loved me? I mean, I thought I was going to have to tell you how I felt, again." "Well, Oak said that to write a poem you had to think of images or memories." Ash folded his arms across his chest, looking pretty satisfied with himself, almost smug, "and I just started thinking about everything you've ever said to me. It wasn't that hard once I thought about it. You left plenty of clues." Serena actually scoffed. "It only took you 5 years, Ash." "Hey," Ash pouted, "honestly it could have taken me a lot longer." With a soft smile, Serena nodded at this. She lifted Ash's hand and began tracing the lines of his knuckles with a strange, practiced ease as though she had performed the action many times before in her dreams. "Well, even if or when you did figure it out, I didn't think you'd feel the same way." Ash watched her play with his hands. Again he was left a little breathless and dizzy. All he could do was bring his lips to hers again. But this time in a slow, gentle kiss that really made his ears ring and the knot in his stomach unfurl with a rush that overtook him. Their lips brushed and pressed and pulled. He heard Serena gasp as he moved away. "Serena," he struggled, "you're the only person who's ever made me feel like it's okay to come back to something." Serena let his words sink into her, closing her eyes just as a light breeze lifted the loose strands of her hair. Somewhere in the harbor, Wailords surfaced and disappeared once more into the starry waters. "Thank you, Ash. All of a sudden, Serena leaned over to peck Ash on the lips once more, and Happy Valentine's Day. She sighed into his mouth and then leaned her head on his shoulder as she mused, you know, I almost forgot. Ash looked down at her and said nothing. He'd been thinking about it, and her, all day. XXXXX as the night deepened, the sky above them bloomed into a sea of lanterns as their papery golden glows began to rise, a river of light flowing upwards into the velvet. Ash and Serena hardly noticed, a little too busy learning how to kiss each other properly to really pay any attention. Their kisses, initially awkward and hesitant, grew more confident as they navigated the new terrain, learning and laughing at their missteps. Pikachu and Sylveon, having seen enough, wandered off in search of something else to look at, leaving their trainers to their discoveries. At some point, in all the shuffling and kissing, Serena's lantern had fallen into the water, completely forgotten. When the performer did finally realize it was missing, the two just laughed, because, in the end Goh was right, the whole thing had really been a little stupid. In comparison to everything else, at least. Of course, Serena did eventually insist that they send a lantern up together with their Pokémon. And that is how Delphox, Pancham, Sylveon, and Pikachu all found themselves helping Ash and Serena scramble to find another lantern, later on lifting it high into the night altogether. The next day, Ash and Serena found themselves having breakfast together in the cafeteria with Chloe and Goh. The new couple had their hands intertwined underneath the table, smiling at each other in between bites, or in Ash's case, inhalations, of food. Ash eyed the new addition to Serena's outfit, a little blue ribbon pinned below her neck, and grinned. Chloe was still a little peeved about Goh's apparently ridiculous poem. Your eyes are like windows to a soul that constantly forgets to close the curtains, really Goh? Come on, she quipped, what does that even mean? What? Goh, with a little welt under his eye, grumbled into his tea, it was a solid poem. I actually stuck with a meter and a rhyme. But did you? And at what cost? Goh. At what cost? Chloe shook her head and pinched the bridge of her nose. Looking up, she glanced at Ash and Serena again, who didn't really seem to be paying attention to anyone but each other. Sighing, Chloe blew out an underbit breath that momentarily lifted her bangs. When you guys go public, it's going to be insane. What do you mean? Ash asked, mouth full of rice. Then, suddenly, the comment seemed to bring Ash crashing back down to reality. He whirled on Serena, a bit distressed. Hey, wait. When do you have to leave? Serena pursed her lips, a frown anchoring the corners of her lips as she absently fed some of her rolled omelet, smothered in ketchup, of course, to Pikachu, who was sitting happily in her lap. Tonight, actually, she winced, but gave Ash's hand a reassuring squeeze. Ash nodded, understanding suddenly dawning on him. This was how it was always going to be. For a little while at least. She'd be tied to Kalos, making people smile. For a while and he'd be, well, wherever he needed to be to keep pursuing his dreams. Serena seemed to sense what he was thinking and, clearly forgetting where she was, she offered him a smile before using their hold on each other to bring him close enough to give him a quick peck on the cheek. Goh wrinkled his nose. Arceus, so cute, Chloe giggled, her glee uncontrollably. Serena and Ash both turned bright red, suddenly remembering their audience. At this time, Oak swept into the cafeteria looking absolutely aglow and pleased with himself. He began to march past their table but then came to an abrupt halt at the sight of Ash and Serena's red faces. Oh? He turned, his gray eyebrow raised. Am I looking at the start of something new? Ash responded with a nod, still blushing as he fidgeted with his shirt collar, suddenly too tight. Well, I guess maybe your poem thing worked. He chuckled, his hand moving to scratch his nose. Chloe chimed in, setting down a glass of juice. Yeah, Professor. Even though Goh's poem was a catastrophe, it was still a very sweet effort. She sent a wink in Goh's direction, who could only muster an annoyed but secretly pleased look in response. How you managed to get them to write anything about their feelings is incredible in and of itself. Be proud. She toasted him with her glass. Oak, accepting the accolades with a melodramatic bow, couldn't hide his pride. Well, of course. I am happy to spread the word about the magic of poetry, the language of feelings. It has never failed me, he declared with a lifted finger. Goh, still in the midst of breakfast, managed to ask between bites, say, Professor, who was your love poem for anyway? His curiosity punctuated by the casual wave of his chopsticks. Oak's response was immediate and gleeful. He produced a neatly folded page from the depths of his lab coat with the air of a magician revealing his final trick. Of course, would you like me to recite to you the final stanza? It's the best one, he offered, his grin wide. The table, caught between reluctance and a burgeoning curiosity, found themselves nodding in hesitant agreement. Ash and Serena shared a look, their eyes dancing with laughter. Oak immediately launched into with gusto. In the garden of time. Under stars so fine, we made our love, gentle and divine. Through seasons that change, and moments in bed that bind. There's a heart I cherish, as our love grows more refined. With kindness that nurtures, and a spirit so free. The one who has always been a light to me, so here in this verse. I softly reveal, the name that in my heart, forever will dwell. Delia. As Professor Oak concluded his multiple stanzas, an initial burst of applause broke out among the group, a reflexive show of support. Hands came together, at first rapidly and then, they slowed, faces grew pale, Pokemon ran away. Oh no, Chloe raised a slow hand to her mouth. Ash promptly began to sputter and choke. Much later on, after the CPR and a beautiful day spent with the boy she'd saved from choking on a piece of rolled omelet, Serena found herself settled on an airplane. She stared out the window, her smile uncontrollable, her fingers dancing on her lips, which were raw and red and swollen. She had almost missed her flight. Ash's grip had continued to pull her back to him every time she'd tried to leave. She hadn't minded, of course. When they'd see each other next was still up in the air, and the unknown had added an urgency to their last moments, pushing them to hold each a little closer, kiss each other a little longer, until finally the last call blared across the airport speakers. Serena caressed the ribbon at her neck. She still couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe all the wonderful things Ash had said, the love he had for her. But if she did ever doubt it, doubt how he felt during their time apart, all she had to do was pull out the little piece of paper in her pocket, and read his words for herself. She had a feeling this would be a new habit, one as absently formed as reaching for her ribbon. She'd rely on both across the years to come. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts and reviews in the comment box. Now I will see you in the next video.